Welcome everybody. It's going to be a new topic, and I see there's quite a few new faces in this group, which is fantastic. So as you're coming in, just, for interest's sake, pop in the chat where you're from. It's always good to see which countries, which cities people are from. I'm in Nairobi at the moment, of all places, and I'm in a hotel room, so it's a somewhat different background from usual. Sunny, windy Cape Town. Okay, we've got sunny, partly cloudy Nairobi. Hi Guy, long time no see. Welcome. Another Nairobi, fantastic. Anyway, it's good to be in Kenya. Didn't expect to be in Kenya, but it's good to be here. Pretoria, great. Come on, we've got lots of people on this list who haven't posted in the chat yet. Just please, in the chat, just put where you're from. It's always good to see where people are from, which countries, cities. And then we'll give it a couple of minutes. I think we had well over 70 or 80 people registered, so we'll give people a chance to get in. Still pouring in. Hi, Willem. Good to see you. Edendale, sorry. Welcome, Tony. Adele, thank you from Johannesburg. Pramod from Hatfield in Pretoria. Great. Siraj, Cape Town, welcome. Linda from Nigeria, sorry, from Nairobi, great. Kenneth from Zimbabwe, good to see you. Who else we got? Philip Wellman, that's a name that sounds familiar. Welcome. Cool, give another few seconds. Thank you for those of you who were on time. Oh, Willem, overlooking the Kruger National Park. Okay, well, I'm not overlooking the national park, but I'm overlooking the national forest, Karuna National Forest. Good, okay, let's get into it, and then others can catch up when they arrive. So what we want to talk about today is this founder fear factor, this terrible fear of people coming into your business, and particularly coming in as non-exec directors. So I'll talk about three main fears that I've come across that I hear mentioned quite often, but I'm also going to run a quick poll to just check to see if anyone's got any others that we need to build into the presentation and factor into the conversation. So just a brief summary or brief introduction. My name's Tim Holmes. I'm senior partner and head of sales at Solar Group. I've been with the company since 2013. And what really drives me is this whole concept of good directors growing boards, but great directors change lives. So my, I suppose, personal mission is to do whatever I can on the boards in which I serve to make sure that the companies that I'm working with really are in a position to change lives. And I think it's probably more important now than it's ever been to make sure that as companies, we really are contributing to the broad society. We really are engaging with all of our stakeholders, so clients, suppliers, communities, etc., and really helping wherever we can. And not only to make sure that we as a business survive so that we can keep paying salaries, but also seeing how we can get involved in the broader community. So what are you afraid of? Why is this thought of bringing non-executive directors into your business so scary? So is this you? So those are just a few things that I've heard along the way. Which fears resonate most? So maybe pop in the chat box, but I'll also put up a poll in a minute if any of these really click. So I don't want strangers in my business. Someone said that to me a few weeks ago, and he's now doing one of my training programs and starting to realize the value of having strangers in his business. But it's scary. It's really scary. We've been running a family business for decades, even generations, and we want to bring in some stranger that we don't know. Someone, and by very nature of non-executive means, or particularly independent non-executive director, means you don't know them. I don't want to be told what to do. I don't want a boss. I started this business because I didn't want to have a boss. So bringing in someone at director level almost feels like you're bringing in a boss. Someone's going to tell you what to do, and that can be really scary. So we'll talk about that and how to manage that. might take over my business. I've heard so many stories of people saying, look, no, I don't want a director because someone I know, they brought directors in and they basically took over their business and he told him what to do and he didn't have any say and they weren't taking in the right direction and he couldn't get rid of them and all this sort of stuff. We'll talk a lot about the value of directors and how to make sure that directors are valuable and as part of the webinar today. And if you've got any questions on any of these spheres or anything that I don't cover during the session, then please pop them in the Q&A or the chat box and we'll try and deal with them either as they come up and if it's relevant, or we'll deal with them at the end. And I don't want the business to be a corporate. So it almost feels like if we're building this proper board, if we're bringing in non-exec directors, going to make us too corporate. They're going to tell us that we've got to do all these procedures and processes and why do we have to do it and why is it important? So we'll talk a little bit about why that's so key and how it can add value. And they'll slow me down. How many entrepreneurs? Come on, put your hand up. Indicate on the participants list or indicate in the chat box who has ever said that bringing in external directors will slow me down. We make decisions quickly here. We're agile. The point of directors is not to slow you down. The point is to slow you down in a constructive way so you make better decisions, but not so that you don't make decisions at all. And someone says, I want strangers. I have other fears. Good. It's a great start if you want strangers. Okay, so let's put this poll up and see what the room looks like, as it were. Thank you, Jenny. You're quick as a flash. So what is your greatest fear? I've given you a very short choice because these are the main ones I'm going to be talking about. And if you've got an other, I'll be very interested if you can stick them in the chat box and admit what that other greatest fear is. So loss of control and high cost, low value are leading the pack at the moment. Cool. Oh, fear of unknown, couple and a couple of others. So please, for the others, please post them in the chat box so we can see what those others might be, and I'll see if I can answer those fears at the same time as all these other ones. Okay, come on, there's a few more of you. Just if you don't have any fears at all, then maybe this is the wrong webinar for you. Maybe something else we need to talk about, and I'm happy to do a consult. So what are you afraid of? Come on, let's admit it. Let's be honest. Let's be transparent. 4 to go. Okay, I think, Jenny, we can end it there. It's a really good expression of loss of control, high cost, low value of non-exec directors, and a few with fear of the unknown and other. Mistrust. Yes, okay. So mistrust, trust in general is massively important, and once bitten, twice shy is a very common problem. So I'll try. It's a really much longer conversation, which I've actually covered in other webinars, if you want to look them up on our website, about how do you find the right people and put the right people in the place for your business. We'll touch on it a little bit today as part of that conversation around high cost, low value. But again, any other questions, then book a consult with me, send us an email, etc., and we can help you. Thank you very much. So share results, that's where we got to. Pretty good spread, but yeah, it looks like loss and control and high cost were the dominant ones. So let's get into it. Let's see if I can close this. There we go. So but I'm going to cover 3 main ones, and good that the main 2, the beginning and the end ones, were the ones that you've all got. So that's great. And the first one is really this loss of control. So what I want to talk about around control is really understanding what type of business you have and what phase your business is in, because how much control you need stage it's at in terms of its growth, because it changes over time. So the first question is really to understand, what game are you playing? Now, many of you have seen my webinars, will have seen this slide or similar, trying to talk about, are you playing a solo sport, tennis, squash, badminton, golf, or are you playing a team sport, football, basketball, rugby? Because the difference is, in a solo sport, you have to have a large degree of control, if not total control, in order to win. And a business run as a solo business is no different. Team sport is very different in that there will be parts of the game where one person is very much in control and very much guiding the play, but they don't often, if ever, manage to do that over an entire match, over an entire engagement, over an entire period of the participation on the pitch. So it might be a project in your business, or it might be multiple years in the business. So on the tennis court, Rafa and Federer, whoever wins is the one who had control as an individual on that court. They dominated the game. They played according to the way they wanted to play the game. They played their strategy. They didn't let the opponent dominate and take over and play a different strategy that they weren't quite so good at. So if you're playing a solo sport, it's really important to be in control. But if you're playing more of a team sport, you don't, as an individual, want to be in control as often, if at all, because we don't want individuals dominating the play. We want people to pass the ball. We want people to use the team effectively. And it'll ebb and flow throughout the game as to who is in control in that moment. But you don't want people trying to take control in the entire match, because then the whole team is not working together and giving the outcome that they want to give. And in a business, it's no different. So if we want to run a craft business, it's all about the individual or the small group of individuals. It's that food shop. What do they call them? The mobile caravan food thing, food truck. Or are you wanting to run an enterprise like a McDonald's, which is a big business? But the structure could be a medium or even small business, but you want to move towards a big business. So if you're thinking of, I want to be in control, then you can be in control and you can be successful if your business is a craft type business. But if you want to build an enterprise, something that's bigger than you, then it's not productive to be in control. And I'll show you as time goes by and the business grows, that control needs to change over time. So it's about being in control is great, but you need to make a decision, which type of business am I going to build? So if you want to build a craft, it's all about you. So being a craftswoman in this particular picture is about your own knowledge, your own skill, and sharing your knowledge with your team and building people up in your team to be craftsmen and ultimately master craftsmen. In other words, they're learning from you how to do that particular job. And you own a job, you don't own a business, because a business that's run in a craft kind of concept has very little value because it's so dependent on the founder, on the craftsman or craftswoman. So as a founder, you have to be in control, because if you are driving the business, you are driving the output of that business. It's all about you. But an enterprise, it has to be completely opposite. It has to be able to operate without your involvement on a day-to-day basis. You have to let control go. You have to make sure that, yes, you can be in control of some things, but you can't be in control of everything all of the time. And an enterprise must have its own significant value and continue to grow and develop its value despite the non-involvement, death, or retirement of the founder. So if you are in control, then how can the business operate without you? And how can the business develop its own value? How can you build a legacy, as I've talked about in other webinars, where the business has a value that you can then sell, or you can live off the dividends or whatever, but it doesn't need you to be in it in order to operate. So an enterprise has nothing to do with you. It's all about the team. The game rules are different. It's separate and distinct from you. And we'll talk a little bit more now about shareholders, directors, and managers. It needs those three groups, those three particular teams to operate. And you must delegate to others. You must let go of things. You must pass control onto someone else. So the 5 phases of growth is something I want to talk about now, because it defines when it's important to have control in an enterprise type business and when you need to start letting go. So these are the 5 phases of growth. I mean, the slide's a little bit small, so you may not be able to read it. But the bottom line, the x-axis is going from a young business to a mature business. The vertical axis is going from a small business to a large business. So you want to be a large, mature business. You want to be in this top right-hand corner, which is crisis of red tape, growth through collaboration. The beginning, the small young business, is very much about your creativity as the founder or the team of founders, your understanding of this product or service that you're delivering, and how you're creative about getting it to market. And it is very much about your control and your ability to drive this business forward. But it soon reaches a point where you need to grow through direction, which is starting to expand into other areas, and you may start leading different pieces if you started with multiple founders, or you might start to specialize in one particular piece if you're a founder and start to think about how you bring in other leaders to look after other pieces. So it's that crisis of leadership. I can't lead every department anymore, and I need to start thinking about which departments I'm good at and which departments I'm not so good at. So there's, Grainer's 1994 5 phases of growth graph. And then you move into the space. So this is the craft. This is where you're typically a business is all about a craft, because it's all about those individuals. But as you start to grow, as you start to move the business to the next phase, you need to start letting go of some things. You need to start bringing in other leaders that can allow you to take the business to the next level. So the next one up is that crisis of autonomy, and then you get to crisis of control. So you're growing through direction, then you get to autonomy. Now you're growing through delegation, and you get to crisis of control. So it's that phase where bringing in non-exec directors is useful, because any point before then, they're just not going to be able to use them. You're not going to get value from non-exec directors, because you need to be in that phase where you already started to delegate, because a board is all about running the strategy and then delegating down to management to get things done. So as a CEO, you need to be able to delegate to lower parts of the organization. Otherwise, you're going to be completely overwhelmed when you start having this board structure defining what needs to happen next and telling you what to do. So this is where a board comes in. This is where non-exec directors really start to add value. So that's why it's so critical you understand where you are on this line, because there will be phases on this line where actually a non-exec director is not the right thing for you right now. And then there are other areas on this line where you're going to really struggle to move forward if you don't have non-exec directors, if you haven't started to let go, delegate, collaborate, coordinate, etc. So you need to make a choice. Am I building a craft? And then you're building a job and it's all about you and you have complete control. Absolutely fine. It can be very profitable. Or are you building an enterprise, which is much more about a team, and then learning to let go and delegate and coordinate and then ultimately collaborate. So I hope that feels a little bit less scary. And then fear of the unknown. So really, fear of the unknown is just about making sure you reach out and uncover what is in your blind spot that's known to others. So at the moment, businesses are run in the space where it's only known to myself, and we hear language like, no, but if one had done, only I can do it, or only I know and understand this business. No one else knows and understands it as well as I do. It's that known only to myself, which is actually partially a facade, because there are plenty of other businesses who've been through the same phases. There are plenty of other businesses who have used similar or even the same products and services, maybe not the same combination, not in the same place, but there are a lot of stuff which is known to others and known to all. So we want to move you into the space of that blind spot, known to others. Expose yourself, reach out, get help, do education programs, read books, ask for support, get a coach, all of those kind of things, so you can start to become more comfortable in things that you currently don't know about. And you start to break down that fear of the unknown, because you start to broaden your horizons. You start to build a team that can support you, can help you in particular situations, get a really reliable corporate lawyer, get a really good accountant on board, all of those kind of things. So you start to uncover and open up your blind spots, because those issues and those resolutions and answers are already known to others. So you want to move to this blind spot space. And as Buffett says, the best investment you can make is in yourself. So put that money aside, do the education, uncover the things that you don't know, ask for help. And it's not necessarily asking your friends or colleagues for help. It's asking professionals, it's asking, I hate the word experts, but people who have been there before. Read the books about business leaders, read the books on anything that you can find on the internet that'll help, and unlock that stuff that you're scared of, but actually it's known to others. So what is the role of a director? So this is one of the things that isn't known to others, but may not necessarily be known to you and can be quite scary. So the main role of a director is strategy, leadership, and, funny enough, governance. So the director on a board is there to lead. So you have to be a leader. If you've been there once, bitten twice shy, then we need to make sure that we're bringing leaders onto that team that work together, work effectively, and lead the organization forward, that are not pulling in different directions. And as soon as you find that someone is actually putting in different directions, then actually, funny enough, as a director, you can got rid of them or remove them much more easily. You can remove a staff member, but move them out, get someone else in who's a better values fit, who's a better fit in terms of attitude, who has a common understanding of where you want to take this business, so that you can drive and lead and define the strategy. The organization then takes that strategy and delivers on it. So management takes the strategy and then makes sure it's actioned. And governance is about the policies and procedures. It's just, this is how we do things around here. There's nothing scary about policies and procedures. They're massively useful, and they can add an enormous amount of value, because you don't have to second guess things. You can start to build processes into your business that are repeatable. So when someone comes into the organization, here's a list of the basic processes you need to follow so they can get up to speed quickly. You don't have arguments. No, but we did it this way last time. We did that last week. We did it like this the other day. Make sure that there's some kind of consistency in the way they do things, because it'll lower stress, it'll lower noise, and it makes your whole business much more efficient. And part of the role of the board is to make sure that those basic policies and procedures are in place, so the business is running effectively. And then how the law sees this business. So what are the foundations around this? So when you register a business, you automatically are defining these three roles of shareholder, director, and manager. Even if they're all the same thing, you actually have to fill in the form. Who is the shareholder? Who is the director? And then if it's an operational business, then it must have some kind of management. It must have something to move the arms and legs of this juristic person, because it has no life force of its own. It needs people. So if we don't understand the difference between the roles of a shareholder, manager, and director, then it is really scary, and can be really scary, because we're going to get caught out. We're not using them fully. We're not getting value from those roles. And also we're starting to set ourselves up for issues down the line if anything goes wrong. We want to make sure that hard line between shareholders and directors is really obvious. We can demonstrate in the documentation, we can demonstrate in the way we've run our board meetings, that there isn't undue influence from shareholders. And that's where non-exec directors really add value. Because if you bring someone in at board level who's not a shareholder, who's not in management, is truly independent ideally, then their focus is on that section in the middle. Their focus is only on doing what's in the best interest of the business, driving the strategy, leadership, and governance of the business. They're not clouded by thinking about shareholder issues and management issues in that moment. They just focus on what's in the best interest of the business. And you can start to separate out those roles and start to put them in their proper place. And I know that is really scary, but once you start to get to the point where you understand the difference and you understand why they are the way they are, then you can start to use them effectively, and you can really start to build a business that's got potential and gives you options going forward. So a shareholder relationship with a company is typically a selfish relationship. I've put money in, I've put time in, I want a return on my investment. Whereas the board relationship is very selfless. I'm doing everything in the best interest of the business. I'm not doing it in the interest of myself. And the Companies Act talks about this a lot, that you as a director cannot do things that benefit you personally. They must be done in the best interest of the business. And management has this weird relationship because it's got a contract and it's got, you've got a contract where you're selfless in the way you're delivering the contract, but you're going to be selfish if you don't get paid, or you don't get the rewards, or you don't get the benefits that you've been promised. So if you're wearing all three hats, it's really difficult to get into the space at board level of being selfless, because you've got all these other conflicting relationships pulling in opposite directions. So I said, understand this stuff, learn about this stuff. It is really important, because if you get into a situation where there's been a problem with the company and someone comes and sues you, if you cannot clearly distinguish between what was a shareholder influence in the board and what was a board decision, then the lawsuit follows the money, and it'll get into your trust, it'll get into whatever else, and that's where it'll find the money. There has to be a very clear separation between those duties. It's also really confusing for the organization as well, because who is in charge? Where is the strategy coming from? If people obviously wearing the shareholder hat are meddling in the operations, are meddling in the strategic conversations, when in that role it's not their place. So be really careful. These need to be separated out, and for very good reason, if you want to run a business effectively. So a high performance director is one that's obsessed with creating meaningful economic impact through their role on the board and role the company plays in the economy. And such a director is not afraid to have the tough conversations as well as do the mundane tasks that together enable board success. So take this paragraph, use it as part of your thinking about who you've got on a board. Are we acting like this as directors? And whether you're an executive director or it's a non-exec director, are we making sure we read the board papers? Are we doing the mundane things of finding out and taking care with our decision-making processes? Are we standing up and saying, look, this is not right? Having the tough conversations, digging into things, or are we just saying, oh, because so-and-so said it, they know, and I'm just going to follow what they've said. We as each individual director needs to be certain that this is the right decision. And we cannot have different voices when we leave the room. Whatever's decided in the boardroom applies to everyone that was in the room. You can't have this, no, but so-and-so said, so-and-so said, so-and-so said. If you've made a decision in the boardroom, then you must leave that boardroom as a team with a cohesive response if anybody asks. So it's that tough conversation bit and mundane aspects are really, really critical. And a board, through its rhythm, decision-making, so boards make decisions. So understand how boards make decisions, learn about how this stuff, because it works. It's not going to slow you down. It's going to make you make better, more reliable, more sustainable decisions because they've been better thought through. And they can be still done in hours or days. I recommend at least days, but it doesn't have to be weeks and months. It's just how you run the process, how you run the rhythm and make decisions in a particular way so that they are done properly and actually documented. So if anyone needs to go back and say, why on earth did we make that decision? You can actually see on a piece of paper, even if it's just a one-pager, oh, that's how we got to that conclusion. That was the options that we considered. Great, now I understand. Okay, now we can learn from that. We need to do something different next time. So very quickly, if you are registered on CIPC as a director, or you are in a position in your organization where you have a significant impact from a strategic perspective on the revenue of the organization or the cost base of the organization, which means you become a deemed public officer, you need to be aware of this stuff. You need to be delivering against this stuff because you are liable for this stuff. So it's about taking care, skill, and diligence, but it's also the fiduciary duties as well. So it's utmost good faith towards the company and act with the necessary skill and care and performing your duties. So act in good faith, which means if someone else looked at that decision and say, well, nah, even if I did a reasonable man test, reasonable woman test on that decision, It's a really iffy decision. You could have done this, you could have done that. What about this? What about that? You took undue risk there. Act in the best interest of the company. So where are the conflicts? Was it because you own the property that you decided that you were going to move into that property? Was the rent too high? Did you ever ask that? No, because I own the property and I needed the money. Whatever those kind of conflicts are that crop up, you need to, as a director or public officer, be thinking, or prescribed officer, thinking about what's in the best interest of the company all the time. This position of personal gain, getting personal benefit, getting some kind of use of company resources that no one else does, all of that kind of thing is a big no-no. And it's specifically stated in the Companies Act that that's what they're going to look for and exercise the powers for which they were granted. So particularly in committees, are you doing the things that you were allowed to do, or are you taking decisions that you weren't allowed to do? And it's about not just what you do, but it's how you do it. It's that whole process, the whole chain of events that came to the outcome that's now starting to be criticized and starting to be investigated and dug into. So as a director and a prescribed officer, you are the ones that hold the can if anything goes wrong along that continuum. So you need to make sure that you are fully aware of what's going on in your full process from start to finish. So care, approach decision-making, knowledge, learn about this stuff. Make sure you at least read a book that gives you a summary of what's in the Companies Act. Do some kind of course, do a 1 day, a half day, or something, so you understand what's in the Companies Act. Lift that level of understanding, overcome that fear, because now you can speak with confidence when that question comes up. How do you appoint directors? How do you remove directors? Know and understand that. They're fairly simple processes, but they need to be followed properly. Otherwise you get caught out. Just like employing someone and removing one of your staff members. Same thing. And be prepared, be diligent. So when the financial manager gives you the financial report, make sure you know and understand how to read it, but then read it. And then look for things which don't make sense. Apply your knowledge and understanding what's going on in the business to those numbers, because there will almost certainly be a mistake in there somewhere. But if you don't interrogate it, they might not be picked up, and that might lead to other issues down the line, either missed opportunities or risks that slowly start to grow or quickly start to grow and have an impact on the business. So it's really critical that if you are in that role, if you have that responsibility in the organization, that you take the care, you have the skill, and you are diligent in terms of preparation and attention to detail. And it becomes less stressful and less fearful once you have that knowledge. And I know, having been through a liquidation process with a company a couple of years ago, having learned all of this stuff made a massive difference, because then I knew what I was saying was correct, and when it wasn't, then I could go and get help and make sure I closed the gap. So all of this stuff, leadership and governance, you have to keep learning. You can't just stop. It's changing so fast, and it's changing in so many different ways. It's becoming much, much more complex. So the last one, high cost, low value. Well, firstly, just thinking about it now, I didn't actually put up a slide of costs of directors, but Jenny, please put the link to the director's fee survey that we did, and I'll talk about it in a sec, because that's got lots of details about how expensive or how good value directors are in terms of fees. So what we're going to talk about is, it's not as high a cost as you think. And if you have got a low value director, low value board, then you need to change that, because it should be adding huge value. One of the areas where we are not getting full value is we have directors, but we don't necessarily have a team, either a team of directors or a team supporting the board that know what they're doing, how to do it, how to get best value from each other. So it's important that your executive team understand what's going on in the boardroom, so they can feed the information into the board in an effective way. The information is correct, it's been summarized, it's accurate, all of those kind of things, so that the information coming to the board is something they can work with and they can make decisions with confidence. They can trust that data. You have to have a team of directors that work effectively together, not all the same profile, asking all the same questions, saying all the same things, coming from the same backgrounds, with the same experience, etc. We want true diversity on a board. So in the South African context, it's become about color, but my argument is it's about background, which school you went to, where you grew up, whether you're male or female, what your age. We want younger directors as well as older directors. We want directors who've come from similar backgrounds to your clients, who live in similar spaces to your clients, ideally. We want male and female aspects, unless you've got all male clients or all female clients. You need differences of perspective, different ways of approaching risks, different ways of seeing opportunities. You need true diversity in that team, and a methodology of how you run the processes, what the policies and procedures look like, but what is the rhythm of the board? So are we having a pre-board meeting? When do the board papers go out? Do people actually have time to read them? Have they read them? When you go into the meeting, do you make sure that the meeting is about take that paper as read, any questions, comments, or opportunities or threats that you've identified? We've got clarity on exactly why a particular discussion or decision paper is in the board pack. There's a summary of it. There's a summary of the considerations that have already happened. There's data that backs up the considerations if anybody needs to dig into it, etc., etc. So that in the board meeting, we can be effective. And it's a short, effective meeting, not a long, drawn out, where people are just sort of catching up. They haven't read the board papers. We end up doing long presentations to share the information. That's all before the meeting. In the meeting, we make decisions and we talk about strategy. So if you have all of those elements, you have a far, far greater likelihood that you'll have an effective board and you will get value from your directors. But if one or more of those elements is missing, then it's very difficult to get that full value. So another way of representing it is the director can pull on this lever. So if you've got strong directors, you've got power there to pull on this lever. But if the methodology is not there, it's inconsistent, it's flaky, and we don't get the minutes, and well, actually the board papers are late, so we never get a chance to read it, then it's really difficult for me to be effective as a director. It doesn't matter how good a director I am. And then the pivot in the middle is the boardroom. So have we got the best team we could have? Have we got the best set of skills in the room who are really going to move this organization? Who are really going to take the best decisions, going to come up with the best strategies? Because we're bringing so many different aspects, so many different perspectives into that conversation, that this is going to be the best solution for our company. If you bring all three of those together, now you can substantially move company performance. And I've seen it where we've had people talk about 10x. It happens, but it only really happens if you've got all of these elements working together. Otherwise, it tends to be rather accidental. It's not repeatable. So if you've got the best people in the room who are working well as a team and have a properly constructed team that's got different profiles, different skills, different perspectives, and you've got a methodology that helps and supports them do the work, then you can start to shift company performance. So that's when you get value. This is the slide. If you're not getting value from your board, look at this and see which bit's missing and start there. So there's a reason why we invest in other companies, because we expect there to be more than one or two directors. We naturally understand that if I'm putting money into something else, some external company, it takes more than one or two people, because one or two people don't have all the answers. One or two people can't see all of the challenges coming. So we inherently know that a board supports the business growth and increases its value, but then we just don't apply it into our businesses. And we need to change that. If we want to build an enterprise that's going to grow and continue to grow and be successful multi-generationally, then we need to build some of the structure in. We can't run this thing by instinct anymore, as one of the people said on a recent course I was taking. He said, I've just realized I've been running this business for 30 years based on instinct, and now I need to put some structure. And that's what it's all about. It's putting some structure so there's continuity, so that you can step out, so that you can take leave, so you can actually work on other projects if you need to, and the rest of the organization can continue without your direct involvement. So this is the survey. I've taken a brief summary of a couple of points from the 2020 survey, and the 2021 survey will be out soon. Thank you, Jenny. In the chat box is the link to download the survey. There's graphs and tables about how much directors get paid. It's a lot less than you think. I think on average, sort of mid to high level is about $20,000 a year. In South African context, it's somewhere between 5 and 15, maybe 20,000 for a chairman. It's not a huge amount of money for someone who's massively experienced, who's probably adding similar value to some of the execs in terms of strategy and communicating ideas, mentorship, et cetera, in the organizations. So this is if you can't shift the needle of, say, I don't know, whatever, 100,000 Rand a year, if you can't shift the needle on your business by bringing in a non-exec director by that much, then they're either non-director or your business is in that phase where you're not really ready. So it's not expensive. It's not as expensive as bringing in another CEO or another exec or whatever in a leadership role. But you're getting the person who's got that value and more, hopefully, if you found the right director. So what were the results when we went through and did the surveys of all these private companies across Africa? Boards with at least one independent director are outperforming boards without one, because they're asking the difficult questions, because they're digging into assumptions, because they're bringing their external perspective and seeing things that you just can't see if you're too close to the weeds. You're in the organization, you've been there for a long time. There are certain things you're going to be blinkered to. Someone who's been outside and working with other businesses can see those kind of things really quite easily and quite quickly. The other thing is their independent director was considered to add the most value to the board surveyed. So the other aspect of that was when someone said, well, which of the directors added the most value in the room? Is it execs or non-execs or independents? Independents came out as the individuals that were adding the most value in that team. And boards would at least outperform those that without them against widely recognized good performance indicators. So we did a lot of measures of different performance indicators to see whether that was true. And in all of the ones that were used, those performance indicators, return on equity, growth, profit, etc. If they had independent directors, they typically outperformed the ones that didn't. And the higher percentage of independent directors, the higher the board's performance score, because you're bringing in more different perspectives, more experience, more skills that you don't have, so that you don't have to make all the decisions on your own as the founder. You've got this team that can support you and work with you, challenge each other's thinking so that we make much better decisions and take things forward. So boards without independence are less likely to increase EBITDA. So I'm saying the same thing, different way around. So this is, I suppose, a bit of a test just to sort of get the point across about if we're too close to the business, we can't always see everything. So let's have a few guesses in the chat box. This is what a deer sees. What is the animal in the background? And then and why can you see it? What made you determine that it was that animal? Okay, that's a few guesses. Go on. Anyone? Tiger stripes, yes. And thank you, Pramod. So have you seen a tiger before? And have you recognized these stripes are different from, for example, Tony said a zebra? So as a zebra stripe's different from a tiger stripes, how do you tell the difference? That comes from experience and comes from having seen something like this before. But it's still not particularly distinct because it's all a bit, blurs in with the background because the colors and everything are very similar. So this is a bit like, I'm in this business, I'm become, in this case, it's red-green colorblind, but I'm blind to the problems because I'm too close to them. Whereas if we bring in external perspective in, we bring in someone who's looking in full technicolor at your business because they have no preconceived ideas, they have no shareholder hat or history as a manager clouding their thinking. They can see in this example full color, then it's really obvious that there's something there. There's something we need to check in on. And it could be an opportunity. Wow, we've got a tiger in this forest. We can up our tourist revenue massively, or wow, we got a tiger in our forest, we've got a serious risk, it's going to potentially kill people. But at least we can react, and we can react much more quickly because we can identify the opportunity and we can identify the threat much more quickly because we have people in the room seeing things from a different perspective, seeing things with different innate abilities. Some people can pick up risks in things much more quickly than others. Some people can pick up opportunities in situations much more quickly than others. So make sure you have a team that colors in all of the different pieces of this picture so that we've got a much clearer idea of what we're looking at. And as a board, to have this kind of view is absolutely critical if we want to be effective. So it becomes part of the recruitment process of bringing a director in, is to say, have they got the skills? Have they got the perspectives that we need to really make a difference? And just sort of closing out, just to introduce you to the concept, look up Ashby's law of requisite variety, because it talks about how this, if you are in a state, which we are right now with COVID pandemic, let's face it, where there's lots of complexity, lots of things coming at us, lots of things that we may not have had to deal with before, we have a choice. We either try and systemize some stuff to reduce the amount of variability, or we need to have more people who think of things from different perspectives to try and get our arms around this variability. So he talks about, for a system to be stable, the number of states that its control system is capable of attaining must be greater than the states that are out there. So if you've got one person running your company, there's just no way you can have enough experience, enough knowledge, enough understanding to be able to get your head around all of the possible states of the system that you're trying to control. You need to bring in other people. And the best place to bring them in is at that strategy, that leadership level, that board level, because then you can get really experienced people in with really diverse views and perspectives that can help you get your head around, hands around that variety at relatively affordable rates. And if it's able to deal with this diversity of challenges, then there's a much, needs to have a repertoire of responses. So it's nuanced in the problems thrown in by the environment. So it just comes down to variety. So reduce the variety by systemization, could be your governance architecture, it could be your computer systems, all that kind of stuff, and increase the variety through the composition of your board. So in conclusion, we covered these three areas: loss of control. So my proposal is, if you're fearful of loss of control, then make a decision about whether you want to be controlled, need to be in control because you're running a craft type enterprise, and go for it. Or you need to start letting go of control because you want to build an enterprise. And actually there is no other choice. You have to start delegating if you want the business to be bigger. Fear of the unknown. So do some training, get an external opinion. Don't be afraid to spend a little bit of money, but don't be afraid to ask, because there are plenty of people out there who have actually been in your situation before. So doing courses, getting into forums, getting into with other groups of people, other business people, talking about the issues you've had, you'll probably find quite quickly that other people have had very similar situations, and they'll give you some context or ideas about how to deal with it. And high cost, low value. Assess what you need. So think about where you are in that growth cycle. If you are in a position where you're not ready for a board, then start to move back to the fear of the unknown and do some training so that you can upskill yourself and make yourself ready for when you bring other directors in, so you can talk as equals rather than as that sort of hierarchy. And then bring in the right people. So work out, what profiles do we need around the table? Which are the ones that are missing? Profiles as in ways of thinking. Have we got the right people coming in onto the board who've got the right attitude and the right values fit for this organization? So that starts by making sure you defined the values for your organization. So do that as prep work before you look at bringing on executive directors. Have we drawn up a board charter that defines how we operate in this team? This is the way we do things around here in this team. We're always on time. We always read our board papers. The responsibility of the chairman is to meet with the MD at least once before the board meeting, etc., etc. List it all down. So any incoming director knows what they're buying into, knows what's expected of them. And make sure that they've got the missing skills. So if you need some kind of legal context in the board and you can't get it just by bringing in an external consultant, that there's a strategic thinking about how do we structure this business and how do we move into a new region or a new continent, then you probably need to bring a director in who's had that experience, had that mergers and acquisitions experience, or had that growing across the African continent experience, etc. Or it could be sales and marketing, you need to do better, but it's strategic thinking. People on the board need to be strategic thinkers, not necessarily good operators. They need to be able to think forward, not think backwards. And that's often the biggest problem with bringing someone with financial experience in, is they tend to be thinking backwards and looking at results that are in history, where rather than thinking strategic going forward about how we structure, how we fund, how we change, how do we bring in more shareholders, etc. So I hope that was useful. Just tick up that other poll, please, Jenny. It's the what next poll, I think it is. So a couple of options. I'm very happy to jump on like a 20-minute call, a half an hour call, just to chat through where you're at, what's happening. Jenny, just put my email address on there. If you can just send me an email, I'll send you a link to my calendar, and we can put something in a diary. So absolutely happy to have those kind of conversations just to help get you on the road. And it could be whether it's about your business or about your role in your business. I'm happy to help. If you want a copy of the Director's Fee Survey, otherwise go to the survey link. Otherwise, we can send you one. And then if you're interested in any director training options, we've got various different courses that we run. We've got one starting in January, another one starting in February. Board support services, so our guide services, where we help and take you through setting up the board, running the board, all of that stuff about care, skill and diligence that we've talked about earlier. And then independent director appointment services. Two aspects. So one is if you want to be an independent director, then by all means join our SODAR director network. If you are looking for independent directors, then we have an Appoint division that can help find the right person for you using all the methodology and profiling that we've talked about earlier. So thank you very much for your time. Questions? Jenny, were there any questions on Q&A? Oh, there's a few here. So Willem, I'm afraid I will lose control of the direction and mission of the business. So the board defines the strategy, but the CEO and the founder obviously have a massive thing, they have a massive impact or massive voice in saying what the strategy should look like. And also shareholders should give some indication, what is the purpose of this vehicle? What kind of, so the analogy I've used, because the word governance comes from Kubernetes, which is about piloting and leading a ship. So what type of ship is it? So shareholders must define what type of ship is it. And then this is written into your board charters, written to your MRIs, written to your shareholders agreement, wherever you want to put it, to make sure that it's really clear and help define what the purpose or promise is of this organization. Then from there down, you're just filling in the details. So if, as the founder, you are really clear on what the promise is of your organization, so like Disney's example is creating magic, then anything below that must fit in with that. So if the strategy, if the mission is create magic, well, how are we going to do it? We're going to build theme parks. Yeah, but what are they going to be different than other theme parks? They must be magical. Okay, cool. As a board, right, we need to now build magical theme parks. And then what's next? Okay, well, particular returns we've got to get on investment because the shareholders have told us they want, blah, blah, blah. But you should be in the room, at least to start with, as you get the board process running. But it's really clear and makes it much easier as a board if we've got a very well-defined promise, we've got a very well-defined vision, and we've got a very well-defined mission. And if you do that on your own as a first draft, awesome. Then the board's just interrogating it, trying to improve it, tweak it, adjust it. And then as a board, as an organization, you live by that document and you go and implement it. Can they destroy my business? Absolutely. Get them out quickly. So learn and understand how a director is appointed and how they are removed, so that you are confident in that conversation, in that process to remove a director. And literally you can remove a director in 10 days. It's not as complicated as getting rid of an executive, for example. If, as the shareholder, you appointed that director, you have every right to remove them, and you're effectively removing them virtually immediately. You just need to give them 10 days notice, have a meeting and say, this is why we don't think that you're suitable for us as a director. Thanks very much. So go into the Companies Act, find out the information and move quickly. So slow in, Have they got the right skills, attitude, profile, blah, blah, blah? Fast out. Because in that role, in the board, if the board's not running effectively, it can quickly have a massive impact on the business. So yeah, very good question. Thank you. What is the smallest board I can have? Two, I suppose. Two people, you need more than one. Ideally three, so you don't have a hung decision. We typically recommend about five, because then it gives you scope for three non-execs, of which two are independent, and then two executives. Typically it's the MDCO or the FD or some other significant strategic thinker in the executive team. So five works very well. Then you just go up and try to balance your non-exec directors, but particularly independent directors with executive directors, to try and make sure that you don't get sucked into shareholder conversations or operational conversations, that you keep it strategic. Would it be normal then to change my board? To review every year. So every director should have a tenure, and then they should be reviewed. Less than 2 years, it's really difficult for a director to really start getting into stuff and really adding value. 3 years is a really good time frame for a review, but you can review, do a quick review and do a board evaluation every year. There's nothing to stop you doing a board evaluation. In fact, it's highly recommended. But you may not do the rotation less than 3 years. And then when you do the rotation, then set down the rules. Like someone cannot be rotated for another, or they can only be rotated for one more period if they're voted in. So then it's maximum 6 years, for example. But make sure those rules are set up front, because they're really difficult to implement retrospectively, because obviously you get a lot of pushback from people who come in as directors. Now they're told, I'm going to be voted off in 6 months' time. Well, where did that come from? I've just got into this. I've been putting a lot of time and effort and learning about this stuff, and now you're telling me you're going to kick me out. So yeah, just be careful, set the rules up front, and then it's much easier. Shane, can you explain how a shareholder who becomes a board member wants to act in their interest as a shareholder? Okay, so typically, easiest example is funding. We need more money to do X. Immediately, as a shareholder, the alarm bell goes off in my head. Oh my God, I'm going to have to put money in the business. I don't have the money in the business. I wanted to do something else with it. You're going to have that context, that perspective when you're talking about this thing. You're going to be resistant. You're going to be reluctant. You're not going to be fully engaged, because the answer that's already in your head is that money's coming out of my pocket because I am one of the shareholder, majority shareholder. Meanwhile, what's in best interest of the business is not necessarily that comes from shareholders. We need to think about options. We need to think about, is equity or getting money from shareholders the right way to go? Is it new equity? Is it shareholders' loans? Is it interest-bearing loans? Is it non-interest-bearing loans? Can we get the funding from somewhere else? Can we set it up as maybe a preference share with a shareholder? Can we get it from a bank? Can we get it from another external investor? There's so many different options that can be considered. But if we're thinking with just our shareholder hat on, typically we immediately think about how much it's going to cost me. So that's just one example. Also, if a return I'm expecting a dividend is going to be delayed because we're now making a decision to invest in a new piece of machinery and need the capital, etc., then you might be resistant. Now, I'm sure we can keep that machine going for another year, another 6 months. We can bleed those assets a little bit longer because I want the dividend now. So I hope that answers your question. Company invests in another company to get a seat on the board. So very often, as a shareholder, if you have a shareholding that's significant, then you have the option to appoint a director. What I would caution people is assuming that you, because you are the investor, are the best person to be that director. I would consider at least trying to find out what that company needs, what skills they need, what experience they need, etc. And maybe you then go and seek out someone that you trust to be that director. The tricky part is if you've gone in to the conversation about that business as a shareholder, it's really difficult to let go of that shareholder hat in the meeting and think as a director. Whereas if I've been appointed as an independent director by a shareholder and I can be removed by that shareholder, Now I'm making sure that I'm doing everything in the best interest of the business. Yes, mindful of what the shareholder wants, but at the end of the day, I'm legally liable to do everything in the best interest of the business, not to do whatever the shareholder tells me to do. So it starts to, again, break apart those different segments. So it's important to understand, just because I'm an investor, if I go and serve on the board of that company I'm invested in, I need to focus on what's best for that business, not what's best for me, because that's when I'll get caught out. Anything else on Q&A? What else we had? I must say the team has not been enough. I must say, thank you, Samson. I will take that to the Appoint team. Just as a sort of general comment around the director database, we have, I think, 1,500 people on the database. And a lot of the people on that database don't have sufficient experience and haven't done training, and they're going to be lower down the list of priorities than someone who has done the training, has got the experience, is in the region where we're appointing, has got the right skills, etc. So it depends enormously on what skills we're recruiting for, what type of organization we're recruiting for, what their criteria are. It's not that we ignore lots of people, but lots of people are just not going to make it to the shortlist because they don't fulfill the criteria. So the best way is to engage with the team and say, why am I not being nominated? What do I need to do to improve my chances? And also, just because you're on the director network, we've got 10, 20, 30 appointments, 50 maybe a year, absolute max, with 1,500 people. So we're never going to find roles for everybody. So I'd strongly recommend going and seeking out. So using the director network as a place of information for guidance, etc. But like any new role, don't rely on one source. Don't rely on the Institute of Directors director list. Don't rely on the director network director opportunities. You need to go and seek those directorships. And the director network guys will definitely help you and improve your chances if you're seeking of finding those roles. So yes, I'm happy to bring that up with the team, Samson. Good points. Most boards have strategic high view rating. Yeah, I mean, the B ratings can mess things up. It's great to see how many hugely qualified, exceptional directors there are that fulfill the B criteria. We're seeing a lot of amazing Black women coming through our training programs who are highly motivated, very skilled, and got an enormous amount of business experience. So they are out there. You definitely need to look a little bit harder probably to find them. I think it's dangerous to load up with executive directors because you're not getting that external perspective. You need that external perspective. That's the point of a cover of having the board. Anything else? So time was up. It's exactly an hour since we started. Any other questions? Otherwise, please email me if you have any other questions. And thank you very much for your engagement. Thank you very much for answering my polls. And I hope that the conversation was fruitful and valuable and helped change your thinking, even if it was just in a small way. Thanks very much. And we'll see you next time. Cheers, everyone.